in. I really appreciate it, Paul. It's really good to see you again. We were supposed to be doing a program with D. Andrew Marshal Esq.
Who is that?
He's a lawyer. He's a very good fellow coming down from Harlem, and apparently we had it set for now. We don't see him here, but we're going to fill in, and if he does come, we'll just have him in.
Anything could have happened, you know. There are all sorts of little things that happen. So hopefully he'll be on the show some other time.
Perhaps so, or perhaps another time, or he might come in the middle of this, in which time we would get some of him in. But in the meanwhile, welcome very, very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program one of MNN's finest. That's Paul Piearo. He's got a program here that he's been doing for quite a long time called I'm Not Your President, which is a kind of interesting title. He's involved with the colors, and he's got I
love the colors.
And he's got a thing going that's really important in my way of thinking. We did a program a couple of years ago with him about it called, what's it called?
Word Space It.
Word Space It.
And hey, you know, there was it's an interesting opportunity to casually step in here and talk about things. And you know, there are two things I was going to talk to you about, and maybe we should, they'll come up today since here we are in front of camera. I was going to talk to you off camera, you know, like person to person.
Yeah, we were talking earlier.
So I'll have two topics, and I'll pass the ball back to you. But there are some things we could talk about, including I think it's fair enough to talk about our American Got Talent experience.
Right.
The initiative that I've initiated. Which I began to talk to you about.
I remember
momentarily, but I've talked to Forrest about, as well as a subsequent. And I was actually going to talk to you about this maybe in 2 weeks, a subsequent further word space it development, which I wanted to talk to you about because it's exciting, and I was going to take it like to another level, as one always tries to do.
Yeah, that's all very, very good.
So these are things we may talk about.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to give the floor back to you. You're the host.
Okay, well, that's very good. I think that's good. We can get into that because that was a very interesting thing that took place with you and the colors and that. But I'm wondering, I think it'd be worthwhile too. It's been a couple, 3 or 4 years since you and I spoke last, and I wonder if maybe you could. You're a producer here. You're also in theater, and you've also got this system, Space It.
Word Space
It, which uses images and things.
Absolutely.
But Paul, I wonder if you might. We'll go over it again because we did before, but this is years ago. But share just briefly for the audience your background, born and raised a little bit.
Surely.
And then we'll talk. We'll anchor this on your personality and your interests, and then we'll talk about these other matters as well. But share your own background a little bit, please.
Well, sure. You know, as in our last discussion, I don't like my background very much. I hate to talk about it, but I recognize how important it is because I'm kind of focused on my work, and I like to think of my work as not me, but what I'm doing.
That's interesting.
But I was born, so I might as well say so.
Yes, you're born. Apparently, your appearance would appear that to be the case. Yes.
And I seem to, you know, there's that funny thing of your story. And a person might or might not like their story. They might have had a different story. And they might want to separate or bring together their story and what they're doing. You know, this is an issue for various people. If we take currently someone like Tiger Woods, and other celebrities. I'm going to riff off on this a little bit because we talk about issues here on your show.
We do sometimes,
And that dichotomy between one's life and what one is doing can sometimes be interesting, challenging, and problematic. For example, if Tiger Woods were really looked upon as a golfer, all of the episodes which have been so much in the news would not have been news if we were really paying to golf. We've had a governor of New York who may have been very good, Mr. Spitzer. Now, he had some episodes in life that seems to have completely derailed his being governor.
He may come back,
Well, this is very possible, but interestingly, the dichotomy between one's life, which might or might not really be relevant. I mean, to tell you the truth, there are people who are golfers who may have great lives and people who might be just terrible in life or have had lives that they're ashamed of, it may or may not relate to what you're doing.
No, that's interesting. I hear what you're saying. Don't forget the one really big one. We had a President Clinton who had done a great deal of things in terms of the political process, and then he got into trouble with a Monica Lewinsky and a cigar or something over on sex or something, and it played hell on his ability to assert the good things that he was doing because of a thing that happened in his personal life. Yeah.
That would be a really key point, because indeed he wasn't able to do his work the way he would have liked to.
He got impeached
because he had to spend his time developing his problems, his personal problems.
Dealing with them, yeah.
And you know, it might have been a better strategy for us all to say, you know, interesting storyline, but we'd really like to can it and get back to the issues of running the country.
Yes.
Rather than forcing him to take his mind off them into the huge complications that developed, which were about personal life decisions, which it could be argued don't really matter.
Yeah, but it does in terms of public relations and so forth. And it
Indeed,
became
that's
politically relevant. And so I think that's what you're saying. You have two-track lives and everything, but as that, I guess everybody has probably something that they would want to hide or something. But these things are becoming more relevant. When Jack Kennedy was president, he was having sexual affairs and that kind of thing, but it was all by the discipline of the press.
In those days, interestingly, it was quite possible to put those things aside.
That might have something to do with the mind of the journalistic class,
etc., and our historical development.
Or Franklin Roosevelt. He was
indeed.
He had a impairment in walking and went in a wheelchair, and they did not exploit that. That was. You can't exploit that if you've only got radio.
And he
or
could,
print.
well,
they have photographs. It's only multimedia that allows you to get a more omnivorous kind of coverage of somebody.
Now,
and
this
it's very
discussion,
interesting. It's very interesting to word space is what you do. But what about your background?
Let me go back.
Let
me do two things.
Where were you born?
Let me do two things here.
Okay, Paul.
One, I wanted to talk about the issues, because your show is about thoughts and issues all the time, and I appreciate that.
Well,
however, I will not be completely avoidant. I will actually tell you the facts as well.
Okay.
I indeed was born in Chicago, and I've had I did proceed to go to school. I went to the Yale Drama School.
You went to Yale Drama?
I did, yes. I have an MFA. Did you know that?
I didn't know you had the MFA.
Yes, I did.
Is that not the lead? If you think of theater or media, that's probably the one that's recognized as our leading school in the country.
Well, indeed.
Some people at Juilliard think Juilliard's better.
Well, that's a fine discussion. Indeed, happily, various strong universities and schools are competing to be the best and make claims, and that's fair enough. Well, I mean, what I mean to say is, and that's fair enough. It's perfect. That's a good. Is that not a good thing? They both want to be the best, and so does NYU. Has a lot of strong things going there. I'd have to say I like NYU, but let me affirm, because we're going to talk about Yale, my treasured alma mater.
Boola, 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 boola,
absolutely.
Boola,
So let's put some let's talk about Yale for a moment.
A
perfectly good, an important university in history of America.
It is, yeah. But in terms of drama
and
studies,
let me follow up on what you're suggesting. Yes, Yale Drama School has a priority. You know, it came to me especially because on two occasions I managed to hear talks by presidents of Yale University.
Mr. Brewster?
Actually, I'm trying to think. Can you give me the name for the guy whose son is now an actor, who became the commissioner of baseball, Giamatti?
No, I would have not been able to do that.
Well, I was able to do it, thank God. I was trying to remember that name. I've been working in my memory, which used to be somewhat deficient. Was very problematic. I'm particularly bad with names, and I've systematically worked at it.
Okay.
As well as working in elements of word space, which is about sharpening your consciousness.
Consciousness, and using images, too. You were doing a
yes,
lot
and
with images.
I'll go into that.
Yeah,
And so I was very happy to say that I didn't know we were going to talk about Mr. Giamatti.
Are we talking about Mr. Giamatti?
Yes,
I guess
because
we
we're
are.
talking about
You brought it
Yale.
up, yeah.
We get this complicated discussion, but we have some trains of thoughts. And
we're talking about the presidents of Yale.
Here's why.
Okay,
Here's why. Because I'm taking up the theme of the importance of Yale Drama School.
Yes, it is a standard.
And one element of one of the many evidences for that, well, is the high quality of people that went there, such as yours truly. Me. Obviously, that would be...
Not only that, if I may, my
Meryl
daughter...
Streep, other people.
Streep. My daughter has...
We could name a number of wonderful people.
My daughter has her MFA from Yale Drama in the director's track and on theater. And I'm
glad you reminded me of that.
Yeah, she's very good. She's doing very well, happy to say. And they had a director, not Stanislavski, but Myrhol. Myrhol was a Russian director.
I'd like to get around to Myrhol, too. I'm very interested in Stanislavski.
Really...
I had a very nice experience here because I was on Paul Gloria's show, the very distinguished show here.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough...
She's doing great stuff, yeah.
And interestingly enough, I was speaking on the subject of Stanislavski.
Yeah.
But let me follow some of the trains of thoughts that we've got in this interesting discussion.
Okay.
It's really, I always like talking to you.
I always like talking to you.
Even especially
off camera.
Off camera.
Over coffee. Yeah, right. Yeah. In real life.
It's not the situation, as it so often is, that people pretend to be pals on TV.
Yeah.
And you see this all the time, morning shows, evening shows, people are, but actually they would never talk to each other if the camera wasn't on, right?
Isn't that interesting?
So often.
That's really
I'm just kidding. I'm sort of kidding.
Not kidding, not really. You know,
well, I don't know.
I have a thing. I have problems with my daughter because she's in theater, and I don't understand theater about where you have to learn lines and things because I walk around the streets of New York, Paul, and
Indeed.
I see it like I'm in a movie, okay? I don't know if it's a form of mental illness or something, but it's like I'm in a movie, and I see Academy Award performances by citizens all the time. If you had the right camera angle, it would be an Academy Award performance if you just captured it on a camera.
This is good.
By the citizens of real life. Living theater, I like them, Judith Molina and Beck and everything.
Let's try to loop some of these interesting elements here that you brought up right now. And let's come back here. I don't want to leave the president out. The reason I mention it is that both Giamatti was one, and then now I forget the.
Remember now, kind of, yeah.
And the current president, whose name I think I don't necessarily know. I'm not going to take a guess, but both of them said the following interesting thing. So this must have been true for some time. They said that Yale was an important school, but the department that is number one in the university in the following statistic, that there are more people wanting to get into it than spaces available, the one where that is the most clear, the most people want.
Than any other department.
The fewer places.
Yes,
is the acting program of the Yale Drama School.
At the acting, not directing.
Specifically the acting program,
okay.
right.
People really are interested in the acting profession. I don't know why so many people want to be actors. I don't understand that, but maybe you could help us. Did you do yours in the act?
No, I was in mine was in playwriting.
She was in director's track. Yeah. But she did a program about Myrhol, and he was Russian, and they brought people from a comparable school in Russia, the St. Petersburg Academy of Theater, and among the 3 or 4 people that came to participate in the project was Vladimir Vorovinsky, a young man of prodigious intellectual capability. They fell in love and got married, and he's my son-in-law. And the father of my 2 grandchildren.
Now,
it's a lovely story.
I wonder if the following fact I'm remembering accurately. There was a very interesting an issue we talked about in Paul Gloria's show had to do with Russian-American culture and the Cold War.
They love theater in Russia. They really do.
Certainly
they pack
do.
The houses, yeah.
But when communism came in, indeed, Mr. Stanislavski was in theater, so he had to negotiate the various revolutions. Russia has had a history of revolutions. The communist revolution was one of several. They have a history of.
Well, I don't know
the freeing of the serfs was very important. There were a number of revolutions. The discussion of revolution was very strong. And
revolution's a big topic in the world, yeah.
Indeed. And both Stanislavski and Meyerhold having theater careers of importance, somewhat contrasting in their methods of work.
Really?
Yeah, but let me
I would like to know that difference.
I'd like to. I'll go into that.
It, yeah.
But an important one, as I recall it, am I not correct? They had to negotiate this. It was a little complicated because the Moscow Art Theater, well, they were doing Chekhov, and you know, Chekhov in his final years, instead of doing what he used to do, you know, Chekhov originally was a writer of popular comedy newspaper writing.
Didn't understand. I didn't know that. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Then, you know, he became a doctor. His key...
Medical doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
Interesting thing.
Yeah.
His key experience, very interesting experience, he went to a prison. He associated with the prisoners, or
was he a prisoner, or
and
was
I
he
think the sick
doing
people...
research?
Yeah, it was research.
Okay.
He may have had a job. He may have had like a research assignment, social science research assignment.
Right.
He wrote up in detail, like a social worker, the case studies of these people.
Wow.
Which is very key to his evolving the short story.
Okay.
Where in addition to his dramatic work, he is a key originator of the whole literary movement of the short story. He
really? Okay.
Yeah.
You got a protagonist.
He was one of the people who gave birth to the existence of the short story.
No kidding.
And
really?
his importance is equal or greater than his importance, which is legendary, in the theater. Now, in his later years.
Yes.
Oh yes. So now it's very interesting because he had this key experience of writing up. This is really something important. He was with these, as I remember it, prisoners. He wrote up their stories. He was very involved in people.
Like you say, like a social
He was
worker.
very involved in people.
That's
He was a doctor
done,
who was very involved in the people.
And he was aesthetic. He was a sensitive person, obviously.
And so his stories, and actually it was one of the key developments in the short story that he wrote about peasants, people on the street, like you talk about. He particularly was out on the street, which he saw in a way like you see it. You saw it as sort of as a movie.
I see life that way, yeah.
But he did too.
Like I'm walking through a movie set.
Indeed. He created the short story. He created the short story in which the ordinary person on the street or in the village or in the fields or on the sidewalks or on the pathways became the subjects of interest.
Really?
By taking that kind of interest in regular folk rather than the privileged as Tolstoy did.
Okay.
Tolstoy had very great difficulty taking interest in somebody who was not of an aristocratic background.
Right.
Interestingly,
different focus. Yeah. Where does Pushkin fit into
let me hold it. Let me keep along here. And I don't know Pushkin, so I'm going to avoid him.
Okay.
But
Chekhov.
it was this. So Chekhov's interest in everybody and anybody, no matter how poor, no matter how bad, no matter if they were guilty or not guilty, no matter if they were well or sick.
Okay, that is interesting.
That focus on...
It's all part of the human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all part of the human experience. It's exactly what he did. So he had what we might call, therefore, the ordinary folk, or everybody, as his subject, which in a way led, which importantly and very significantly led to the short story, which takes up all sorts of stories.
Okay, yeah.
Of life, of life at every. Hold on.
Okay.
Want to run over here.
Yeah.
It is therefore colorful that his great plays, The Cherry Orchard, Uncle Vanya,
Yeah, Vanya, yeah.
The Seagull, Three Sisters, featured aristocratic households. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
very interesting
Okay,
development.
I'm holding on. Yeah, aristocratic
right.
characters, but
who have estates.
yeah.
And he created that life as in looking at it as a kind of a dying life. But what he did is he made a real theater so that it felt that you were really with these people. And in fact, it's interesting. A very interesting thing happened to follow the story. I think it's an interesting story, so I'm willing to push it a little bit.
Yeah.
So when the revolution came in, you know, the bad people who killed so many people in the revolution had many people were executed. You know, the whole history of communism, et cetera, where a lot of people were killed. And they didn't necessarily like intellectuals or artists. They were problematic situations.
They were proletariat.
And indeed, Chekhov's main plays really brought you into the households of the privileged of the aristocrats. So in a way, yes, they were not the people that communism portrayed. Communism took over and they had a view of the working class, et cetera.
Socialist realism.
Yeah, and they had certain directions for art, which they controlled, and people could be executed. Now, I mention this because, as I recall, Stanislavski was the director of Chekhov's plays, main plays. Actually, if it weren't for Stanislavski, those plays people did not like. When those scripts went around for Chekhov's big plays, which are considered some of the greatest works of theater these days, they have a long history.
Interesting.
No doubt about it.
The initial response was not favorable?
Not at all.
In the reading?
He couldn't get them produced. It was rejected.
Why?
People couldn't make sense of them, which people still don't necessarily make sense of them, but their method, their subject matter, and their nature, go see them, seemed impossible.
Well, what did Stanislavski introduce that made them popular or able to be produced?
First of all, he was willing to do them.
Well, that's the beginning, yeah.
Number one. One point I want to make on this line, which is a very rich subject matter, and actually maybe we'll talk about it for a while and go on to other things. Well, maybe I will go back to talking about myself. What am I talking about?
Well, you're talking about yourself because it's a reflection of your MFA.
Well, it does. That's right. It's a
playwright.
Yeah, it reflects my interest in theater.
Yeah.
Indeed, which clearly I maintain, and it is influence, and it actually influences word space it, and so we can go along there. But Chekhov created the sense of a real present environment, much like you found. This is part of what he did in the theater. Let me just say that the idea of I just go out in the street and I see life is kind of the theater that Stanislavski created. You went in there and you saw this mansion and this place with a cherry orchard, this environment, and you felt that you were there. It looked like a regular place.
This is stage writing. This is writing for the stage, not film.
This is the great work of Stanislavski and Chekhov, which showed the aristocrats. And then came the communist revolution, and you had the Moscow Arts Theater. Now, these Chekhov plays were that nobody would do. I'll tell you, it's a true story that when he tried to get these done, somebody did it. It was a complete bomb because they're just ordinary life going on, and that wasn't theater. That was melodrama, drama. There were all sorts of activities that made something look like theater. It was really dramatic. It had plots. It had traditional types of characters that were very colorful.
Now Chekhov in the hands of Stanislavski.
In the hands
he brought them to life.
He made it possible for it all to happen.
Okay.
Although
that's
Chekhov,
important, yeah.
So, and Chekhov wasn't completely happy with Stanislavski or vice versa. It was a conflictual relationship. But here's a kind of line of thought. Well, interestingly enough, when the peasants were freed and the serfs were freed, which is part of Russian history, this happened at the same time. You know, before a certain point in the Moscow Art Theater, which is a theater which did Chekhov, that was founded by Stanislavski. It's so important and exists today.
Okay. Okay. You said there was a difference between Stanislavski and Mirhov.
We're going to do that. People who were not aristocrats couldn't go to the theater.
Right.
There was an interesting, in Stanislavski's biography, he talked about it. He said, suddenly the poor, the serfs, etc., were freed, and our theaters actually had them coming into the theater.
Right.
And they had not necessarily ever gone to the theater.
Oh,
because
okay, look,
theater was
our
not,
other guest is here, so why don't we just come? We're going to switch over.
We'll talk some other time.
We'll pick this up later. Thanks,
nice
Paul.
talking
Your
to you.
Come on in, DeAndrew.
This is the real guest. I was just pretending to be the guest.
Take it out. It was very interesting. We're just going to keep the camera
rolling.
We'll
talk some other time.
Yeah, just keep it down.
Hey, we can talk off camera.
Come on. Okay, come sit down, DeAndrew.
Thank you.
Okay, and just stick this up on your. We're going to go right into it. Just put it on there. You don't even have to put it under your coat. Just put it there. And let me say welcome. We've our guest who has come late. We had to just start with somebody else, but we're about half into it. We're 27 minutes into an hour program, so we got 31 minutes left.
Excellent.
And so we get a chance to do it. And let me introduce him. If they can get the credits up, they will. His name is DeAndrew Marshal Esq. Yeah. And he's an attorney at law. And we met the other day at an event that Mr. Ricks, Cornelius Ricks, and others have put together about judicial behind the bench and everything, and he had some statistics and information about a program that he's trying to get attention for, which, if I'm not mistaken, you set me right.
I did.
Is that it is specifically about the reality of racial profiling by our political system, where it's overwhelmingly targeting brown and black people in an inordinate degree, filling prisons with people, and it's a blight upon the society, if I'm reading it right, and we want to talk about that. But DeAndrew, could you share just quickly now, we're abbreviated, your own background? We can talk about that issue, just your attorney at law, just surely, we're born and raised a little bit educated, and then we'll get into subjects that you find interesting and important in terms of the contemporary human condition.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
DeAndrew Marshall, attorney at law,
right.
and I've been practicing law for approximately 15 years now.
Okay.
Born and raised in Harlem, was the beneficiary of a very good public education, and ultimately I received my bachelor's degree from the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And ultimately,
in Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia,
yeah,
the great city of
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Where'd you study?
I was an English major.
Okay, good enough, yeah.
And ultimately, I went to law school, graduated from Northeastern University School of Law.
Chicago?
No, in
Boston.
In Boston.
That's right, I'm sorry, yeah, okay.
And I was a beneficiary of that co-op program. And I came out of law school. And essentially, I hung up my own shingle immediately.
Right, okay.
And I had the benefit of some of my friends and colleagues who were practicing for a long period of time, and I benefited from them greatly.
Okay, very good. Now, am I right, or did I have it right? We were at this event the other day. We met for the second time. I met you a while back for another one. But you were part of a panel, and you were talking, you had statistics.
I did.
About what we would call rousting by the police of certain individuals within our society. Is that something that you're concerned about? And we've got you down, we're trying to get a system whereby that could be effectively addressed by the citizens that are inordinately being rousted by our police services in Harlem and other parts of the country based upon racial profiling?
That is correct, and first, and just so the record is straight, we met at the Behind the Bench series that is being sponsored by Cornelius Ricks, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine.
Good guy, yeah.
At the New York Public Library, located at 7 West 126th Street, the Harlem branch.
Right across from
Marcus Garvey Park,
right,
exactly.
Right. It was great group of people. Great presentation.
We did meet there, and certainly the issues that concern me as a practitioner of law is the issue of what they've coined as racial profiling. I like to use a more broader expression, a violation of our constitutional rights, because America's.
America. Okay, good. Okay, it's a broader template.
It certainly is, because an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
That's been said by a lot of wise people. That's true. Martin
Luther King, of course.
Yeah, right.
And certainly, the NYPD, as well as other law enforcement agencies, have been accused of disparate treatment as it relates to African Americans or people of color, or for that matter, people on the lower echelon of the social strata.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And the NYPD actually financed a study by the Rand Corporation, and that study came out in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a study that was geared towards addressing disparity in police stops. Some of the statistics that they came out.
Do you have that sheet with the statistics with you?
I do have that sheet now.
It blew my mind, and when is this? Yeah, okay, here it is. Yeah, this is. Why don't you read from it? We're gonna maybe. Go ahead. Numbers do not lie.
First and foremost, the numbers do not lie. In 2006, the NYPD completed 508,540 stop and frisk maneuvers.
That's in New York, over the whole city?
Over the whole city.
Now, what percentage of them were WASPs? No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your train.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think the first statistic that bears noting is that 90% of those people that were engaged,
that's 458,000 out of 508,000,
were not engaged in any unlawful activity, and
no summonses,
no summonses, and no arrests were executed at that time.
Wait a minute, that's 90%.
So in other words, 540,000 people were stopped and frisked. Now, as
frisked, including stopped,
stopped and frisked, and if. First and foremost, as the law states, under People versus DeBoer and People versus Holloman, and under the Fourth Amendment analysis, a police officer can only frisk an individual under certain prescribed circumstances.
Okay.
And one is they would have to have had probable cause. Probable cause that a crime is being committed.
Right, you are. It seems to me, if I remember.
Right. Or if they fear for their safety. Okay.
And or a public disturbance. Go ahead. Yeah.
If they fear for their safety, that's what our court has said.
Well, wait a minute. 90% were engaged in no unlawful acts. So what were they being engaged in? If there was suspicion, basis of past thinking about certain groups or certain how do we account for such a vast, disparity in the percentage?
That's a legitimate question that can only be answered by NYPD. I can speculate as to why they may have been stopped.
Speculate a little, if you want.
Well, having represented and now presently representing individuals who have been subjected to what I would cast as illegal police stop searches and ultimately seizures, have a lot to do with the perception that officers have as it relates to certain segments in society. Right. For example, I represented an individual who was arrested for resisting arrest and other crimes.
Okay.
And when we tried that case, there were 4 officers that testified, 2 Hispanic, 1 white, and 1 black. And the question and it really blew me away.
Okay.
And I wasn't, normally when you ask a police officer or any witness a question, you should basically know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah.
But I took a gamble because what they described at that scene was a group of African American males standing around. Okay.
Yeah.
And when
that's a crime?
Well, I'm going to get to that. And I probed them. What was the thing that drew your attention to these individuals on 145th Street and Broadway at 1 o'clock in the morning on Halloween Eve or Halloween Day?
Was it the monkey costume or was it no?
No, it wasn't the costumes. They each answered that they were loitering. Now, and I said, well, when you say they were loitering, because loitering is a crime that is articulated in our New York State Penal Code. Okay. And loitering has its own specific meaning.
I would think it should, yeah.
And I asked each officer individually, well, what were these individuals doing that led you to believe that they were loitering?
What is loitering? How do you define loitering?
Loitering, in a broad sense, means standing around for the purpose of engaging in a criminal act.
Well, that's a big jump there. You're standing on the corner.
Exactly.
Damon Runyon, I'm standing on the corner of 42nd and Broadway, and along comes Harry the Horse.
Exactly.
I mean, people are often standing on the corner, or sitting on the stoop, or something.
This was my point, and the jury understood this also. Now, here's the answer, which was a shock to my conscience, and it should be a shock to everyone's conscience. Quote unquote. They were standing around doing nothing.
Okay, now, where does that take us, Consular?
That takes us to an acquittal. Ultimately, it took us to an acquittal.
Minimal.
But it raises a very serious question in the training and the perception that these officers, 2 Hispanic, 1 black, 1 white, has with respects to African American males. If a group of African American males,
I think you can bring in Latino to a degree, right?
Well, you can.
I think you can. It's brown and black.
You can. Well, the statistics
we can
bear
get to
that
Arizona
out.
Later, maybe.
Yes, we can. The statistics do bear that out. That there is a disparity in the stop and frisk as it relates to African Americans versus white, or African American males, or Hispanic males versus white males.
The reason they were arrested because they were black.
Well,
they wouldn't be if they were standing on the corner of Elm Street in Ames, Iowa, and they were all talking about farm prices.
I doubt that they would have.
They would not be.
I doubt they're very serious.
Can we show some more of these statistics?
I think we should.
We got 90 percentile in terms of that, but what's the next one? 86 something.
In
86%.
In 2006, 80% of all 86% of all persons stopped were African Americans or Hispanic.
86%. This isn't the whole city of New York, or is this Manhattan? Is that Harlem?
No, this is the entire city of New York.
The entire city of New York.
Now, what?
86%. 406,000 of all the persons, 86%, that's nearly everybody, all persons stopped were African Americans or Hispanic.
Now, and it bears noting
what does that tell us, Consular?
Well, that tells us a number of things. What the statistics don't tell us, and what the study neglected to tell us, was where these stops were executed. I would submit.
Okay, surmise away a little bit. It's worthwhile to get at the real truth. Yeah.
That a lot of these stop and frisks are being perpetrated in particular neighborhoods, in particular precincts. I know the 46th precinct and the 40th precinct in the Bronx has a very bad reputation for egregious police stops.
Okay, now, are they concentrated in areas where there is a concentration of residential people of a black persuasion?
Yes, there are. But what they also say, when I say they, NYPD also base their stops on areas being high crime areas, and therefore they target various individuals. Now, I'm not against police doing their job or policing the community where they work.
And we want to try and see things from the standpoint of some young policemen who may be very nervous anyway because they're not very well trained and everything. But that's another side of the equation.
Well, I'm not
very dangerous.
Well, I'm not willing to make excuses for violating one's constitutional rights.
Thank you. Okay,
we live in a society of laws, and no one is above the law. The supreme law of this land is the Constitution, one of which is the Fourth Amendment.
Is there anything, they just had a recent thing in the Supreme Court about Miranda rights? Is there anything about the Miranda, if they stop and, can they stop and I heard you say frisk people, body cavity search or something without Miranda rights? Or what, talk about harassment and prejudice, you know what I'm saying? Do you understand? Miranda.
I understand Miranda.
It's being challenged in the Supreme Court now by a decision. Sonia Moyer.
You raised two issues there, Miranda and body cavity searches. Now, as of late, a number of individuals have come to me and have expressed concern that they've been subjected to unnecessary or baseless body cavity searches.
Yeah, roughing up. They could be roughing up.
No. When I say body cavity searches, I literally mean think of a strip search, taking your clothes off, squatting and coughing and being degraded in that manner.
Absolutely, yeah.
And sometimes on the street.
There's no Miranda principle that comes into situations like that?
Well, Miranda only has to do with a Sixth Amendment right against self-incrimination or to have a lawyer present when you're being questioned. The Fourth Amendment guards against searches of your person, of your home, of your personal effects. There is a higher standard that is required when an officer makes a decision and determination to execute a body cavity search. Now, that practice has run rampant for some time. The courts in the state of New York and the federal courts have addressed that issue, and the law is abundantly clear on that. That you have to have probable cause. You cannot subject a person to a strip search or body cavity search based upon a misdemeanor. If
probable cause is carefully delineated what determination of probable cause is, or can that be just, well, I wanted to? Well, that's probable cause in the mind of somebody who's paranoid.
Because I wanted to is the rationale that is often given to these young persons at the scene. The color and badge of authority that officers present to these young people, who, by the way, have been conditioned to believe that what the officer says is in fact the rule, or is in fact the law.
Of course, that stands. That's there. Yeah.
But it belies reality and it belies fact, and it also runs afoul of the law.
I'm really sorry you came here late because there's so many things that we could get into, right?
Yes.
And one of the things I want to get through the statistics, and it's there, and we wanted to touch upon the thing down in Arizona, the Latino thing that now stop, ident and all that kind of thing. But one of the things I wanted you to get to is that the law is set up so that people have to, in order not to be thrown in prison for 25 years or something, as they can threaten them with plea bargain, and therefore not make any complaint in terms of what complaint avenues there are of this. Like the police review board or whatever, however it's done. And it would be good to establish a campaign where people are not intimidated by plea bargaining things about, do you understand what I'm saying? There's a pressure there. So that there could be an inundation of the court and the police system by citizens who would set up a system where there would be complaints for the fact that they were inappropriately and inordinately stopped, so that they could bury the court system and the policing system with complaints from citizens that would not be intimidated against complaining against these egregious kind of things that happen. And could we get to that part of your overall mission?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
My goal and my mission with what it is I'm doing, in addition to practicing law and being a husband and being a father, one of the things I aim to do is to educate the public as to what their rights are. And I launched a program called Persistently Helping Lift Ourselves, and the acronym is PHLO, FLOW.
Let our people flow.
Let my people flow.
Thank you,
Persistently
Mr. King.
Helping lift ourselves. And one of the goals is to educate these people as to what their rights are. If you don't know what your rights are, how could you vindicate those rights when they're being violated? How do you know that your rights are actually being violated if you don't know what your rights are?
And being intimidated by them saying, if you think you're going to complain, brother, you're going 10 to 12 years in prison, and you only get 6 days if you go. A plea bargain process really just cuts out from under the ability of people to complain in a way that they ought to be able systematically complain against the egregious reality.
It does. Now, again, what my mission is to educate people who are innocent of crimes. Now, I have nothing against plea bargaining, because as a criminal defense attorney, sometimes you have to plea bargain where a person is in fact guilty of a crime.
Isn't it egregiously twisting the scales of justice, the plea bargaining system?
No, I think plea bargaining is...
I mean, with people who are innocent. Or within the drug war. They got all kinds of people who are going to have to snitch if they don't want to go to jail, and it becomes like a thing of secret tales told to the police and secret agents, because the crime is like drugs, and that is that.
May I address that?
Please. And our prisons, incidentally, we've got 2.5 million people in prison now, I think, or something like that, and they're overwhelmingly of the black and brown persuasion, are they not?
They are. And
the children being taken away from people in foster care negotiations are overwhelmingly in New York City. I saw somebody, 98% are black and brown persuasion when they take the children away from them in a foster care situation? We got some serious problems here in River City, brother.
We have major issues.
Okay.
We have major issues, and let's just go back a moment. In terms of addressing the violations, what people have to understand is, first and foremost, you have a First Amendment right to redress grievances. You have a constitutional right to petition the government to redress grievances when your rights are being violated.
And they ought not to be able to intimidate you with threats of their authority.
Right? Yes, that is correct.
Right,
and once you've been, but if you don't know you have rights, if you've been conditioned to believe that this is the norm being 90% of you coming out of your house on a daily, at any given time, you are going to be stopped, and this is the way it is.
Get used to it. Get over it. Yeah.
But there's
put up with it.
But the other side of the coin is, you may, as Officer Joe Friendly may believe that that's in fact the case. I will submit to the violation at this time, but bear in mind that I realize that I do have rights. I will exercise my rights, and I will exercise my options to redress this grievance, and I will see you in court, and I will see you at the CCRB.
Thank you. I did a program last week with the fellow that's got this, maybe different prepaid legal and that, and they got a little card they give somebody. When somebody comes and rousts them, they present the card that has that information about Miranda and so forth, and that I have the right to call an attorney now, and they could address it on the spot if they had a sense of empowerment that there is constitutional guarantees against what's going on for the innocent citizens that are just being rousted because of racial prejudice.
I agree, and let me just add this point. If, for example, if of the 406,000 individuals that were stopped in 2006, or of the 867 people that were stopped between 2006 and 2007, if half of those individuals had exercised their constitutional rights to what? To redress a grievance, to complain.
Review board or something. There are systematic ways that they can submit a grievance.
Right.
Within the system of the police and the city government.
That is correct. The civilian,
and they don't do it in very large percentages because they're intimidated?
Because they think it's a waste of time, and they have been acclimated or conditioned
Just
that
to
it's not
accept it.
going to make a difference.
You would like to make a difference by having it systematically set up so that those avenues open to them can be available to greater numbers of people who are rousted inappropriately, in order to flood the system with those people coming forth with their other people in order to bring an end to this kind of egregious situation, or to address the situation and realize their constitutional rights to complain.
Absolutely. Some people people have to get involved, and it's not a waste of time. It does take time, but it's absolutely not a waste of time.
What are the avenues open to somebody who's rousted inappropriately?
The first thing they should do is to either hire counsel to deal with the criminal action if in fact they're actually arrested.
So this is going to cost them a whole bunch of money to pay some big-time lawyer to buy a yacht?
No, it doesn't.
Or is there some way to make those legal services down to a form or a system where it's even maybe free and it involves no cost at all? Can that be done, or are we just going to let the lawyers get rich on the fact that the people have to pay them big fees to write up important papers and all kinds of details? What's the story? Can you get a form?
Yes.
A Bloomberg form that would do it, and it just takes no time, make it simple and legally binding.
It can be simplified, but it's because there are serious legal issues that are being addressed. It's something that should be handled by a professional.
Why don't you get some professionals who will get behind the idea of simplifying and making that free? Can we make it free, or do we still have to have the lawyers getting rich off the oppression of the people?
Most civil lawyers will take these cases on a contingent basis. In other words, they will receive no money until the case has been settled.
Are there grievous? Okay, go ahead.
Judgment by.
Okay, that's good. That's it. Legal usually doesn't pay any attention unless there's some money involved somewhere. That's what the legal system's about. So there are where you can complain. You can complain in a way where there's no. If you complain complain, the policeman, what is the experience in the court? Are there large damages that can be voted against the police department? And there's money to be realized.
Absolutely.
Okay, if there's money to be realized about the thing, you could have a contingent only if there's money involved.
Yes.
But what about the mass of people who don't necessarily want to have money, but by God, they did it, and I want to get a complaint in and get it in and get large numbers who could do it at the signing of to get it systematized, to get many people without worrying about the money.
Harold, most people who are subjected to this type of treatment,
well, it's 90%,
are by and large not concerned about the money, and lawyers are only going to take cases from which they can realize some kind of profit or meet their costs, because it is costly to do this type of litigation.
Why is it made costly for citizens to complain in some sort of way? Why isn't it just down to a form? Or something that is done within 10 minutes and signed, and a system that makes it streamlined without all the details.
You can certainly streamline.
Don't you want to do that? You want to get it not just a couple people are going to make a $100,000 settlement or something egregious than that because there's money to be made, but for the people who are being ill-treated as a class.
Harold, just in terms.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Filing fees and serving defendants in this type of process.
Okay, what is if somebody gets arrested, cavity searched their son or something, and it was done bad, and there was a grievance, and you want to complain, it's going to cost that person a lot to complain. No. They have to do filing fees with the court. They can't have it down to a system where those fees are not relevant. If it's going to cost them $100, $200, nobody's going to do it because they need the $200 to buy bread.
You can always
file. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. You can, if a person wants to proceed pro se, that means by themselves, they can always, and they meet the financial economic requirements.
What does that mean, a financial requirement?
Well, if you're below the poverty line, you can file informis pauperis as a poor person, and they'll waive all your filing fees. But again, because you're dealing with very sophisticated lawyers who represent the city, who are not so generous when it comes to settling in terms of they're just not going to give the store away.
Okay, help me out. Help me out. You said that if you're poverty struck and so, how much would it cost a citizen? Let's suppose he's making $10,000 or $20,000 a year. He's on the edge. He's got family. It's not like that. How much would it cost him in order to file a complaint against his kid having been searched bodily by somebody egregiously without getting into a lot of money that's going to challenge his ability to put food on the table? How much does it cost?
Well, the filing fee to purchase an index number in state court is $210. To purchase an index number in federal court is $350. And then there's also, you have to serve the documents you have to literally get a processor to serve them.
Okay,
that's about $35 per person.
That's going into a legal procedure. There's no sub-legal kind of approach by which this could be done by a social organization to get some sort of attention to this fact without somebody having to fork out. That's if you're filing an order to show cause or something, or you're filing a case.
Well, you have to purchase an index
There's
number.
no way to complain short of that?
There is. You can complain via the Civilian Complaint Review Board, but...
Is there any use at all to try and do that, or do they just throw them in the trash?
Well, it is use, but...
if you had 100,000 of them, would it begin to take attention at the New York Times or something? If they didn't cost them anything to do it, and they could just do it, and they're not going to be intimidated by either money or by the fact... Do you understand what I'm saying? To make a really effective cry against this thing.
Whenever there's volume, people start to listen. If you have volume at the CCRB, people are going to stop and listen. If you have volume in the New York State Supreme Court or the federal court, either in New York City in the New York City area being the Eastern District of New York and the Southern District of New York, and judges are beginning to see a spike in the number of cases.
Well, you've got the statistics that could be presented, prima facie.
If I as a lawyer am willing and able to represent an individual, that's only half the equation. The complainant, the plaintiff, the person who has been violated has to be willing to come forward also. Which
is there some way for them to come forward where they're not going to have to put up a lot of money?
Yes, find a lawyer who's willing to do it on a contingent basis.
Okay, that's good. There must be a lot. There are people that are not everybody's interested only in the money.
No, they're not.
And there are social movements that could do it who would be aggrieved with this. And why don't they? I think what you want to do is flood the system with complaints.
Well, I was
not necessarily one that's going to get a $100,000 settlement or something, but just fit it with complaints that is simple and easy and could be put into journalism purposes, and you know.
Harold, if 100 people were to come to me today, even though I'm a small operation, if 100 people were to come to me today, I would expand the operation to accommodate all those people. There's a lot of talented lawyers in New York City, in New York State, who are quite capable of handling this, and at the same time, there's a lot of talent in the Corporation Council that they represent the city, and ultimately they will represent NYPD.
Yeah.
So there is not a dearth in the talent pool. There's a dearth in the people willing to come forward.
Now, why are they not coming? One thing is if
embarrassment.
It's all right.
Embarrassment and humiliation.
I'll get rid of one thing. Brother, one thing get rid of. You have to pay $500 to complain or something. Get rid of that. And then how can you have a system where it doesn't cost the person anything for the complaint to effectively begin at a grassroots level to get a massive number of people who will get over the idea that they're only embarrassed them if they're not doing it. Get over the idea it could be done. And then protection of those people when they come and try and retribute against them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, Harold. I don't think...
And then maybe another level when you get a case that can go to the Supreme Court or something.
The cost factor is something that's built in. I don't know that we're going to be able to get rid of that, barring petitioning our New York State and our federal legislature to do away with the filing fees. So but if you have an agency or a group of lawyers,
could cover them maybe.
Right, which is what they do anyway.
You can't do anything along class action or anything.
There are class action suits that have been leveled. They do pay, and because, as far as I'm concerned, the pressure is not kept up, I think the NYPD falls back into their old habits. Now, but again, the NYPD has a tough job.
Of course.
I think they make it a lot tougher by doing things such as this, i.e. violating people's rights, because they wind up having to, in many instances, having to address this. You have a bad stop. It's wasted effort. It's wasted energy. You can go to any criminal court in New York City, be it Bronx County, New York County, Kings County. Yeah. And sometimes the lines are wrapped around the corner. They're coming out of the buildings, particularly in the Bronx. The lines are wrapped around the corner.
It's awful.
And I would be hard pressed to believe that listen, there are pockets of.
Isn't there something that could be done short of the court? Something
in terms of
complaint, some sort of system of massive complaint to get massive numbers of saying enough already.
I think
without them having to put out a lot of money. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't.
I mean, somehow maybe it's sociologists or something.
The way the system is set up
is so prejudiced.
The way the system is set up, Harold, is. There are certain ways to remedy problems, and certainly there are individuals who want to go out and resolve the problem themselves and picket the police. Okay, that's one way to do it. That's an exercise of your First Amendment rights. The other way to do it is to sue, and the city
costs money. I see.
The city is not going to
respond.
One
of the problems in this universe and any parallel universes that may exist by string theory is that there's a system of limitation on time, and we've run out of time because we were late getting together.
Yes.
There are many details we could have done.
Yes.
But I really thank you for coming in, and that we want to do everything we can. The young man's name is D. Andrew Marshall.
Yes.
You want to give your phone number here?
Yes, my number is 212-571-3030.
Say it again, D. Andrew.
212-571-3030, and I'm located at 225 Broadway, Suite 1804. And, of course, my email address is mr.marshall@hotmail.com. I do answer my phone calls. I try to consult people as best I can. And if you're available on June 17th between 5 and 8 o'clock, please come down to the New York Public Library at 7 West 126th Street, where Let My People Flow, as well as Behind the Bench will be sponsoring another forum, and we'll be educating our community, and we're trying to expand this this movement.
Well, keep up the good work, young man. Do it. I just think it ought to be, it's egregious, and it ought to be, and we didn't even hardly get to the thing that's going on in Arizona with all the immigration and that kind of stuff now, because that's getting very dangerously fascistic in his feeling.
Indeed it is.
And it is that kind of thing. Thanks for the good work. Keep it up. Didn't mean to harass you with a lot of questions.
Hey,
I would just like to see the situation addressed.
You're no worse than any judge or my father.
Worse than your father? I can't believe
In terms
that.
with the questions.
Oh, that's
in
really
terms of
good.
the questions.
The judge is one thing, but the father,
no,
man, he really gave it to you,
He
right?
peppered me with a lot of questions
something
also.
Accounts for you for having come up so beautifully well.
Thank you very much.
Good to meet you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of the program, and thanks for coming. Glad we got it in the tail end. We'll have to continue this later.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for viewing. Good night, everybody. So I'm sorry you came late and everything, but...
You know, I was sitting out there for